Hey, how's it going, everybody? Today I wanted to talk about Star Wars Visions Season 1. Now, I decided to go back and rewatch Season 1, which I had seen once before when it first released, for two reasons, really. Now, the first reason is that Season 2 and 3 have been out for some time, and I just never dove into those, so I wanted to revisit Season 1 before I got into those, which I plan on doing very soon, and also because one of these episodes in Season 1, The Ninth Jedi, is getting its own limited series on Disney Plus at some point in 2026 this year, and so I wanted to delve back into Star Wars Visions and complete this show, at least the 3 seasons we have right now, because I don't know if we're getting a season 4. I wanted to complete this show before The Ninth Jedi comes out, just so I can be caught up on things and so I can be, back in the mood to watch shows, because I'm notorious for not wanting to dive into new TV shows. It's hard for me to want to start a show. Once I start a show, I'm in it, I want to continue, and once I get through a show, I want to watch more, but it's hard for me to just get going. And so you may have noticed I've been watching through a lot of things that I've already seen before. I'm just trying to work myself up to want to watch something new. I kind of do, but I'm kind of, halfway there almost. I'm there and then I'm not there. It, varies day to day. So I'm just trying to make myself get into something by watching something that I've been wanting to rewatch for quite some time. Honestly, for years. And so I just finally bit the bullet and thought,
there's no use prevaricating about the bush.
And I think I kind of underestimated how nostalgic it would be to dive back into this first season. I don't know exactly what it is, but I think it's a multitude of things that makes me feel nostalgic to this first season. The first being that I just really enjoyed this first season whenever it first came out. It was something new, it was something fresh. And I think the second big reason is just that I was having a great time in life at this point. Whenever this show came out, it was just at a good point in my life. And so just revisiting this first season just, kind of brings back those memories of what was happening and what was going on and just, the happiness that I had at that point. But in regards to this first season itself, I wanted to just kind of go in and talk a little bit about each episode, some things that I like, some things that I don't like. I'm not going to be doing that for each episode. It's just going to be the things that stand out to me in that episode, whether they're good or bad. Now, starting off with episode 1, The Duel, this is an episode that I've always kind of had mixed feelings about, and it's not because I don't like it, it's just because a lot of people put this episode a lot higher in the rankings for this season than I would personally. It's not one of my top 3 favorites of the season. I know a lot of people would put it up there. They really like the character of the Ronin, and they really like the animation style and all these things, and while I don't disagree with any of that, it's just, personally, it's just not in my top 3. That said, I do really like the character designs. I really like the characters themselves, what we get. I think the story is interesting. Something that I really like about this episode is the black and white, or the grayscale, or whatever it technically is, but still having that dash of color. You've got colored lightsabers, and you've got a couple of different things throughout the episode that have color to them, and I really like that stylization in this episode. I really like the lack of color and how it just makes the things that do have color just pop all that much more. I really like the fights and the action sequences in this episode. I think they're really well done. Something that not all these episodes have is good action and good, fight scenes, and that's something that I think this episode really does well. Aside from that, I really don't have that much more to write home about this episode, other than I understand why people put this episode on a little bit of a pedestal. The Ronin is, after all, a very cool character, and he's kind of one of the faces of Star Wars Visions, even though all these episodes are, their own thing. Episode 2, Tatooine Rhapsody, is vastly different from Episode 1, and this was kind of where I realized the first time I watched this season how different this show was going to be, and how much different these episodes were going to be from each other. And I am aware that this is a lot of people's least favorite, or one of their least favorites of the season, and I understand that. This episode is definitely toward the bottom of this season for me, but there are a few things I do find interesting about this. Number one being that this could technically fit into Star Wars canon if you really wanted it to. I really enjoy all these episodes and Star Wars Visions as a whole being exclusively Legends material. I don't want any of this canonized. I like it the way it is, just Star Wars inspired Legends stories. That's where I think this show thrives, and I don't want any of this to be canonized, but I do kind of appreciate how they can make these things fit in and not break canon, even though this isn't a part of canon at all. It's completely separate. I appreciate the effort if that was part of the thought process that was going into it. And I think the biggest thing that's specific to this episode that I enjoy is just a focus on the music in Star Wars. Star Wars has always had great music. Star Wars has always had music be a big part of it, but there's never really been any focus on the music of Star Wars. Maybe in Legends that's more of a thing, but in canon, on screen is what I'm trying to say. There's really not any real focus on music. There are scenes completely dedicated to music in shows and in movies, but this episode is the story of a band, and I think that's just on another level for a focus on the music. And so I think that uniqueness is something that really works for this type of show, something that is completely different to what we would ever get in canon. Episode 3, The Twins, I think is an interesting one because I don't love it, but I also don't dislike it. I don't really dislike any of these episodes. They kind of range from great to okay. This one I think falls somewhere in the middle, and I don't really know what to think of it, but I do think it has some interesting parallels. We get a story about twins born of the dark side, obviously being a sort of parallel to like a Luke and Leia situation, although they are very different. I think that that's something that is interesting, and we get to see a lot of cool designs. I think the design of their ship is really cool, and this one kind of feels like an homage to Star Wars a little bit more than some of the other ones. Some of the other ones are stories just based on Star Wars, either, heavily or loosely, but this episode feels specifically like an homage to the OT. The twins, Cara and Am, have kind of become synonymous with this show as well, similarly to the Ronin, but I think in this situation it's a little bit less about them being iconic and a little bit more about them being in the 3rd episode of this show ever, and therefore they got a little bit more merchandise made for them. And so they're kind of just, some of the characters that you think about immediately when you think about Visions. Episode 4, The Village Bride, is when this show really hooked me the first time that I saw this season. I really love The Village Bride. It's a top 3 episode for me. I think that it has everything that I want for this episode. It has an interesting and new planet. It has an interesting culture with traditions. I feel like there's lore here. And I think it's a great mix of good characters, of good action, good story, lore. I think it has all the makings of something that could warrant a spinoff, similarly to how The Ninth Jedi is getting one. I don't think that The Village Bride will get a spinoff at any point, but I really enjoy this episode. Another thing that I really enjoy, and the thing that really hooked me, was that the music in this episode is probably, not even probably, it's the best in this season. I think so, maybe you disagree, but this music in this specific episode is what grabbed me the first time that I watched it, and it pulled me in, and it made me feel something on an emotional level, which is something that's very impressive for a single episode of this story. There are so many movies and TV shows that never get me on an emotional level, even after I watch a full 2-hour movie, after I watch a full season of a show, but to be able to grab me with one episode and make me feel something, that's impressive. Episode 5, The Ninth Jedi, is widely regarded as the best episode of this season, and I have no problem with that. I also think it's the best episode of this season. This is another one of those episodes that really reaches out and grabs you. It's got everything. It's got intriguing characters, great action sequences, the animation is good. The story is incredible for just being the one episode, and if any episode was going to get a spin-off miniseries, it was going to be this one. And so I'm very pleased that this is getting a spin-off. I'm looking forward to this show. I hope it stays non-canon and just out on its own in this whole Visions, Legends side of Star Wars. That's where I want it to stay, and I'm really looking forward to it. This episode is kind of the epitome of what a lot of Star Wars fans are craving right now, which is an Old Republic story. This episode fits perfectly into that time period where, the Jedi and the Sith are warring. Lightsabers in this continuity are out of existence, and we've got this lightsaber smith who has sort of recreated this design and recreated the ancient weapon of the Jedi. And I think that's such an interesting concept because now you've got what's left of the Jedi and what's left of these Sith acolytes trying to regain this knowledge, trying to regain this power that they've lost, that has been eradicated from the galaxy. And I think everything about this episode just is so intriguing, and I think there are zero things that I could say negatively about this episode, even if I wanted to. Episode 6, TOB1, is one of the weaker episodes of this season, I think. A lot of people have this toward the bottom of their episode rankings as well, and I definitely understand why. It's a little bit more childish, it's not quite as serious as some of the others, and it's just not on the same level as the others, though I do think it's okay. It's like Tatooine Rhapsody. I think it's still fine and it has its merits. It's just difficult when you're comparing it to the previous episode, which was, S tier. Something that stood out to me in this particular rewatch, though, is I think that the fight scene at the end of this episode with TOB1 and whoever this mysterious Sith Lord is, I think that fight is pretty good. And that's something that I didn't really remember from my first watch. I also appreciate that even though TOB1 is a droid, he fights well with the lightsaber, but he never uses the Force. And that's something I also didn't remember from the first time I watched it. And that's something that I really appreciate that this episode does, and something that I think is a good idea generally, because you kind of have to stick to these laws and rules of what is and isn't in the Star Wars universe in order for it to still feel like Star Wars. And if you start making droids and non-organic people able to use the Force, it kind of just takes away from what we know the Force to be and how we know the Force works in the Star Wars universe. And so even though this is non-canon and they can technically do whatever they want, I still enjoy and appreciate that they stick to these sort of laws of nature in Star Wars. Episode 7, The Elder, is a really good episode. I think it does a lot of interesting things, and it also kind of tugs at that desire to have more Old Republic stories or High Republic stories before Phantom Menace, things like that. And I really like the dynamic between Master and Padawan in this episode, and their trust in one another and their faith in one another and their understanding of who the other is. And I think that's an interesting thing that gets explored in this episode, aside from the fact that I think it's very interesting that we get to see an elder who was maybe part of the Sith, maybe not, maybe who just learned from the Sith and became his own, powerful being. I think that it's very interesting what we explore in this episode, all while not really getting any answers in the end. I think that that's something that, again, could fit into canon, but also something that is just part of the laws of Star Wars, kind of. We know that at this point we can't have a Jedi discovery of Sith necessarily. We know in canon that we have some, inklings by some characters that something is going on, but there's never anything definitive, and I like that at the end of this episode there is still nothing really definitive other than our experience. Like, we know we fought such and such person and he was doing such and such things, but that doesn't really matter, because as we know from canon in Phantom Menace, Qui-Gon Jinn fights Darth Maul and goes to the council and they say, nah, there can't be any Sith. There haven't been Sith for a millennium. And so I think that that works. You can have these Jedi fight this Sith, or, Sith wannabe, or whatever you want to call this elder, and it just doesn't really matter because there's nothing definitive to bring back to the Jedi. Again, I'm talking a lot about canon stuff. I don't know why I'm doing that. This is just a legend story. But, I can't help but compare things to canon and sort of, line things up. This episode doesn't necessarily have the best fighting or fight scenes or action scenes out of all the episodes, but I don't think it really needs to, because this episode, to me, feels more about suspense, more about mystery than action. And that's something that I really appreciate about this episode. And a lot of people, I think, have this in their top 3 episodes for the season, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe not the majority, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people, a good chunk of people. And to me, it's just outside that top 3. I would probably put this 4th overall. I'm not ranking these episodes, by the way. I'm just trying to gauge where they are as I go. This is probably my 4th favorite episode. It's right outside the top 3 because Lop and Ocho, episode 8, is in my top 3. It's probably my 3rd favorite. And I know that might be an unpopular opinion. It might not be. I don't know. No one really talks about this show. I have no idea what a lot of people think about these individual episodes. But Lop and Ocho is one that really stuck out to me the first time I watched it. And upon rewatch, I still really enjoy it. And I think this is another episode that just really has a lot going for it. It has great lore and storytelling for just being one episode. It's a very interesting world. You kind of get this establishment of culture in this one episode. There's just a lot going on. They were able able to fill out this story a lot with details and with lore and with story without needing a long time to do so, and that's something that I really can respect. I also think this is a great dynamic with the family. You have the father, the daughter, and then the adopted daughter slash sister of the other two, and how that dynamic really changes when the Empire arrives, and you get to explore these concepts briefly of found family. And I think the big reason why this episode is in my top 3 over The Elder is because when I was watching this season for the first time, this is one of those episodes that really stuck out to me and grabbed me on an emotional level. I think that the emotion in this episode is really well done, and it's impressive for being such a short episode. You get attached to these characters, sort of, in a way, and so it's easy to just get drawn into this episode a little bit more than some of the others for me. Episode 9, Akakiri, I probably butchered that, but episode 9, Akakiri, is the last episode of this season, and honestly, I think this might be the most underrated episode of the season. It's one that it's not in my top 3, not my top 4, I don't know where it falls in the rankings, but I really enjoyed this episode. I did the first time I watched it, and I still did upon this rewatch. It's one that I think is a very interesting concept. I really like the exploration of predestiny and of predetermined outcomes and of how visions can be changed or not changed. I think that's very interesting. I think that we've explored that a little bit in Star Wars canon, and I really like the continuation of that being explored in this episode. And I really like the emotions and the feelings that this episode invokes. I think that a lot of the other episodes are full of wonder, they're full of adventure. Some of them are filled with sadness, some with happiness. But this particular episode kind of just fills you with dread and with despair. And even in the end, none of that is resolved. It's just amplified times 10 by the end of the episode. And I really respect that sort of bad ending that this episode has. It's an episode that kind of leaves you wanting a better resolution to this chain of events that happen in the episode, but you kind of get what you get, and you just get this despair. And that's something I really enjoy, because not a lot of stories do that. Overall, I really enjoyed season 1 of Star Wars Visions. It's something that I thought was interesting and a cool concept that I don't know why people don't like it. But if you're a Star Wars fan and you've never seen this and you just want to sit down and watch something unique that you don't have to, invest the same sort of attention into like a canon show. I personally kind of treat canon shows and canon movies as something like very serious, whereas this, as long as these episodes are fun, I'm having a good time. And I think it was just a great idea to allow Japanese animation studios to have these sort of opportunities. I think that there's a lot to be offered from those studios, and we see it on display here. It's also kind of a sneaky way to get people interested in Star Wars. There is a group of people who are anime fans who have never seen Star Wars, no interest in Star Wars. It's a good bridge to get them interested in Star Wars. And now that I'm sitting here recording this, I know people like that. I know some anime fans who don't really care for Star Wars or haven't seen Star Wars. I think I'm gonna tell them to watch this. But yeah, what did you think of season 1 of Star Wars Visions? What's your favorite episode? What's your least favorite episode? What do you think of just this idea of a show in general? Because this is kind of the first of its kind. And if you've been on the fence about giving this show a shot, I recommend you giving it a shot. It's not for everybody, but personally, I think it's a fun watch. But yeah, that's really all I've got to say about Star Wars Visions Season 1. I'm going to be hopping into Season 2 and 3 eventually. Those probably aren't going to be the next 2 videos. There's a lot of other things going on. I haven't caught up with some other things that are kind of big and important right now. So maybe I'll hop into those first, but Season 2 and 3 of Star Wars Visions will be coming eventually. And of course, The Ninth Jedi will be coming when that show makes its debut at some point this year. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for sticking around. If you want to help me out here on YouTube, liking this video, commenting on this video, subscribing to the channel, or checking out some of my other videos, all help me grow the YouTube channel. I have social medias linked in the description, I believe. So if you want to check those out, I would appreciate that. I do some other things on this channel. I do not only other TV show reviews, I do movie reviews. That's kind of mostly what I've been doing right now, just because it takes a lot less time to watch a movie as opposed to a TV show. But I'm also getting into the world of gaming a little bit more. I'm playing through Super Mario Bros. 3 right now for the very first time, and so that's going to be on the channel as well. But yeah, until next time. Bye.